Okay, you're on.
I would like to call the Policy Committee of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Monday, May 11th at 6:02 p.m. We are meeting in an online format. My name is Maya Lena, and I'm the chair of the Policy Committee. Tonight we have with us committee members Vice Chair Maki Bondo and Board Member Yusra Ali. We also have Chair of the Board Sarah Lentz joining this committee today, and we have Chief of Strategy and Operations Dr. Sarah Warren. Um, I will go over the agenda and then I will open up public comment. So tonight we have three orders of business. We're going to look at and vote on some proposed changes to the middle school boundaries. Dr. Warren will give more details on this, but this is has nothing to do with the resolution on middle schools. It's just talking about aligning the boundary lines for the middle school so they match up with the new boundaries for elementary. We're going to look again at the temperature standards policy, EBBD, and we will vote on that tonight. And then Dr. Warren will show us an amended, or excuse me, a proposed version for the 2026-2027 school year calendar. So that is what we're talking about tonight, and I would like to see if there's any public comment.
Just to clarify, that's actually the 27,
Oh,
28,
I'm sorry.
and it's just a draft.
Yes.
It's for some discussion and input. Yep.
Sorry, it actually, you know what, I was reading off the agenda, Dr. Warren, and it says 26-27.
Oh,
That's
okay.
probably what happened. So
Yes, we will have to
it
get that.
the line item says 26-27, but the link to the PDF says 27-28. So thank
Okay,
you for clarifying. Okay. I don't see any public comment, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and I'll turn it over to Dr. Warren.
great. Thank you and good evening. I'm going to share initially just a slide deck. Oops. Okay. So as a starting point, we're going to revisit this issue of the middle school attendance boundaries. The committee spent quite a bit of time looking at this at the last meeting, but just as a refresher, this is intended to align and supplement line 2 and supplement the recommendations already approved by the full board for the elementary attendance boundaries. The attendance boundaries committee that did all of its work over more than a year, which led to that vote by the board, was not able to really get to details around the middle school boundaries, but we knew that we needed to clean those up a little bit in order to make consistent feeder patterns so that students weren't being moved just for elementary school and then split off from those same peers when they got to the middle school level. And so that's really the goal of this. It's a relatively minor adjustment. And the recommendation would be to actually leave this as an option. If there's a student that currently falls within these areas, they could stay where they currently are in middle school if they want to. And that at the moment means, well, as of the time that this was looked at, about 34 middle school students. So I'm going to flip to the actual proposed language because last time what we were missing was actual language to vote on. And so we drafted something for the committee to consider.
Can I ask a quick question, Dr. Warren, just about the
Sure.
slide previous? And if it covers it and what you're about to say, that's fine. But just making it optional, would that just be optional for those students currently enrolled in middle school? But if it's a new student enrolling in middle school, so eventually it'll phase out in 3 years, it will no longer be optional.
Right.
Okay,
That is the idea.
thank you.
And if that's not clear from this wording, then we can alter that to make sure
Okay,
it's
great.
yeah. That's the proposal anyway, right? Um, so would it be helpful if I just read the proposed language out loud? Okay. On February 24th, 2026, the Portland Board of Public Education approved several recommendations put forward by the board-appointed Attendance Boundaries Committee, which included minor adjustments to some elementary school attendance boundaries. As the Boundaries Committee was not able to complete its recommendations for middle school boundaries, they recommended the board continue to examine the middle school boundaries, especially in reference to the changes that were made to the elementary schools. The Board Policy Committee took up this work in order to ensure that middle school attendance boundaries remain consistent with the elementary boundaries and to ensure that students in the changed elementary zones move with their peers into the same middle school. The Board Policy Committee recommends the attached adjustments to middle school attendance boundaries. This change will go into effect immediately upon approval by the full board. However, middle school students in the affected areas will be given the option to choose to stay in their current school until they enter high school. In summary, at the time that these proposed changes to the middle school maps were made in March 2026, the impact of changes in what they called the northern area, and that's related to one of the attached maps, would be all only affecting students. They would be moving from Moore to Lincoln, and that includes 23 students in grades 6 to 8. And again, this was as of March. There were 23 students who reside within the area that was moved into Talbot. 10 students in grades 6 to 8 who reside in the area on the elementary map who reside within the area that was moved into Longfellow. And then in what they referred to in these maps as the southern area of the city, there was only one student in grades 6 to 8 who resided within that area, and would be moved from King to Moore in that cleanup. And then the other changes are really just map cleanup. They don't actually affect any middle school students currently.
Vice Chair Bondo.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I just have a clarification. I try to understand the language here on I really see the affected student, I mean, in those areas. So those are the 23 students, right, who's going to be moved to Talbot, and the 10 student grade to 6. So they going to Longfellow. So
No,
what we say?
sorry. Let me interrupt, Vice Chair Bondo. These
Uh-huh.
actually are not students who are moving into at the elementary level. These are students within those zones that got changed at the elementary level, who are actually middle schoolers. I realize that's
Oh,
convoluted.
yeah, yeah, yes. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I see now. Okay,
Okay.
never mind. I got it. It was kind of a little confusing for me because
Yeah.
on the narrative we've been talking about elementary school, but so I see the the grade. So the way I understood, so those are the students who will stay in the current middle school if they want to, if they choose to,
Yeah.
until they move to because the high school is about choice, right? It's nothing
Right.
to do by the zoning. Perfect, right?
Right. It's well, preference. Yeah. They have
Okay.
the opportunity to apply and potentially be given a seat. Right. Exactly. So these 23, as the first line anyway, those 23 students live in an area that was moved um, into Talbot Elementary, but they are currently middle school students, so they're not affected by the elementary shift. But future students who live in that same area would be going to Lincoln. Whereas if they're at Moore right now and they would like to stay at Moore, this is saying they can stay there. But down the road, I mean, once these guys get older and go off to high school, and the next crew of kids comes through in that area, they would automatically be sent to Lincoln.
Dr. Warren, I have two questions.
Mhm.
One is this doesn't discuss transportation at all. So I know with the elementary, if families were choosing to stay within the current rather than the changed boundaries that transportation would not be provided. At least that was my understanding. Is that similar to this, or would we accommodate those students?
So actually on the elementary front, if students were already receiving transportation and they chose to stay in their elementary school as a result, even after these boundary shifts, we're still transporting
Oh, okay.
them. We're
Okay.
not taking away the transportation because it felt like that was not consistent with the spirit of the resolution, which was trying to allow people to stay where they were if that's what they wanted. At the middle school level, it's a lot more complicated because we don't transport nearly as many middle school students given the 2 mile distance. But we do also have hazard zones, and so their eligibility for transportation would really be dependent on where they live and future potential changes to middle school transportation policies and procedures. Again, my assumption is that probably most of the students who fall into these areas that are currently, in school would probably stay in the middle school they're in. I suppose there may be some families who might make a different choice. But we
Okay.
would do what we could to support them, in whatever the right decision was for them.
Okay. And then I just had a clarification question, and Chair Lenz, you may have to help us with this too. But the second bullet that says in the southern area of the city, and it says moved from King into Moore. I actually think it's King into Lincoln, but I want to make sure we're all looking at the correct map, and I understand what it's talking about because I am wondering if it's the map that's talking about that section of Stevens Avenue south of Brighton Ave. But if that's not it, then
I think this is actually way down by the water. I could be wrong. I'm not looking at the map at the moment. I think it's that little sliver that's down on the peninsula, closer to East End.
oh, okay, the southern end.
And stop sharing for a second and look for the maps.
Thanks. Because there is one map that's called MS Clean Feeder Zoom Northern, and then the next one is MS Clean Feeder Zoom from King to Lincoln. There isn't one that's called Southern.
Oh, well, let's
So,
see.
and in relation to the northern one, the Stevens Avenue area is more further south. So,
Mhm. That may be right then. Let's see. I copied and pasted those notes from McKay, the consultant. So it's possible that either she mistyped or we're looking at a different map than the one that she was thinking of.
I don't see a section that has students going from King to Moore, I don't think.
Back to her.
I think it would make more sense King to Lincoln than King to Moore when you see demographically speaking. So I tried to figure out from the map. Interesting.
I apologize. There's so many versions here.
Dr. Warren, while you're doing that, I might ask my committee members what they thought about that piece about students that are currently enrolled. So as she was reading that language, I was wondering about where is it? The last part that says, however, middle school students in the affected areas will be given the option to choose to stay in their current school. I was wondering if it made sense to add the words actively enrolled. However, middle school students actively or enrolled in the affected areas or something like that. I don't know if anyone, while Dr. Warren was reading it, felt like, is it anyone that lives in this neighborhood or just students that are currently enrolled? But it might be worth thinking about that.
Maybe currently
Currently,
enrolled as
yeah.
opposed to actively or currently actively, but something that it indicates.
Now rather than forever. Middle school students. However, currently enrolled middle school students in the affected areas. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't,
I mean, it's something that's important and affects people, but I'm wondering if it's something that we could, if we did vote on this to pass it to the board, get clarification between now and then to have it amended or recommended to be changed before it comes to the board.
yeah, I just want to make sure that when I answer this, I'm looking at the right map, and right now I'm having trouble making sure that that's that's the case. Because you're right that the one that we thought was aligned and that posted. Let me go back into that one again. Uh, I actually think you're right that it should have said from King to Lincoln. And that's the cleaner feeders that she's labeled. So I think it was actually just a misstatement in the email text that explained the shift.
I mean,
Because
it makes sense.
yeah, the map is clearly, one map is showing more to Lincoln and the other is showing King to Lincoln. So if you're comfortable with it, I would edit this to say King into Lincoln.
Okay. So do we need to make amendments to this? It's not a policy, or do we just edit? Or is it a policy because it's a boundary change?
I think you should just use a formal process just so
Okay.
it's.
And Chair Lentz, if we wanted to also add in the words currently enrolled, can we do all of this as one amendment or? Okay.
I think so. I think you have general consensus on these changes. So yeah, I think you can do it as
Okay, great. I'd like to make a motion to accept this recommendation to move it to the full board. Is there a second? Yes, thank you, Committee Member Ali. Are there any questions from the committee on this motion? Is there any public comment on this motion? Okay. Is there any discussion on this motion? I have an amendment I would like to bring. Okay, so I would like to, Dr. Warren, I would like to add in the words currently enrolled in the second to last sentence of the opening paragraph so that it will read, however, currently enrolled middle school students in the affected areas will be given the option to choose to stay, etc. So the only addition is the words currently enrolled after the comma, after however. And then in the second bullet point, I would like to change the word more to Lincoln. Sorry, I'm toggling between windows here. Okay, so are there any questions about this amendment? Is there any discussion? Okay, then roll call vote. By roll call vote, please indicate whether or not you are in favor of accepting the middle school attendance boundaries recommendation with the proposed amendments to pass it on to the full board. Committee Member Ali.
Yes.
Committee Member Yusra Ali.
Yes.
Vice Chair Bondo.
Yes.
And I am a yes. So that passes unanimously. Thank you so much, committee and Dr. Warren.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next, the committee will review and vote on the latest draft of a new policy, EBBD, temperature standards. And again, as a reminder, the committee has been working on this one for a while. This is something that's required as of this school year by Maine state law. The requirement is actually that districts have a policy related to school buildings, but the committee decided to go a step further and work on a policy that actually addressed other places where we have students, so buses, vans, as well as outdoor activities. The committee last meeting had requested a little bit more information in order to make some final decisions. And so I'm providing that here. One of the questions was what temperature standards schools have been using already to guide their decisions about outdoor activities. And I got some mixed answers on that, but the two most common ones were 13 degrees and 17 degrees Fahrenheit. That was with wind chill. And that was being used by some, not all schools consistently as a cutoff for outdoor recess. And then the upper end of, when we're talking about heat, we had developed some guidance 2 summers ago because we were finding a need for some kind of structure and guidance for schools. It's not fixed, it's more of a range, but the range said that once you get to 100 to 105 degrees, you would consider cutting back on outdoor activities. And then after 105 degrees, you would completely shut them down. I know that in this committee, there was discussion of even in the 90s starting to feel quite hot. And so that's something I think for the committee to finalize and decide on. And then a question about whether there have been any heat-related illnesses in recent years. And the response from our lead nurse was that there have been a number of incidents. Most of them are related to students who have some kind of a chronic condition and end up struggling in one way or another with the heat. So clearly, one way or another, whatever limitations are put in place by the committee, we need to, I think, redouble our efforts to make sure that we are monitoring students who have particular health needs and conditions. And then question 3 was around our athletic programming and how they manage these types of issues. And I understand from them that they work with the NFHS, the National Federation of State High School Association standards, and that helps them prepare and respond to heat-related issues on the athletics field. So the standards that the committee has been looking at would still, I think, be fine for our athletics programs, but they get actual sort of added support and ideas and procedures through that guidance and through the peer group that they're within implementing athletics programming. Oh, that's the next one. So let me flip to the policy again. Just as a reminder, this is again all posted online, but this is the current version with changes that have been made to date, including adding in the temperature standards for outdoor activities as well as vehicles. And we can amend this. I know that Chair Lena had some thoughts on how she might like to amend it, and so I will turn it back over to you, Chair, to take the conversation forward.
Thanks so much. Are you going to share the document or?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's not showing. I thought I was sharing.
It's okay. I am proposing to change the minimum outdoor temperature to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, including the feels like. And I also am proposing to change the outdoor maximum temperature to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, including the heat index. So those would be 2 amendments that I would bring forward when we're getting ready to vote. And welcome any discussion or other thoughts. Okay, well then I am going to make a motion. I'm sorry, Chair, Dr. Warren, could you scroll to the top just so I can read the title? Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to make a motion to accept the temperature standards for schools and vehicles, policy EBBD, to pass on to the full board. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bondo. Are there any questions from the committee on the motion?
Yeah, the question is, so you stated that you wanted to make an amendment. Or are we just accepting this, or is the amendment
Well,
you're doing?
thanks for the question. I will be bringing up the amendment once I get to that spot in the process. And
Okay.
yeah, we can have a discussion then about that amendment. Any other questions on this motion? Is there any public comment on the motion? Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? I would like to raise an amendment. I am proposing that we edit the minimum outdoor temperature, change it from 15 to 0. Again, this includes the wind chill. And I would also like to change the maximum temperature for outdoors to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, this includes heat index. So are there any questions on this amendment?
That work. Hold on.
Yes, you see
Highlight it.
Raleigh.
Is this the same conversation we were having about thinking about p kids who do not have access to resources?
Yes, it is. And I just want to point out that the language in the policy says at all times, staff members will ensure that students are appropriately dressed for outdoor weather and when needed, may shorten outdoor activities to reduce the time during which students are exposed to cold. Um, and I know that Dr. Warren said that if we did reduce the temperature, that efforts would be made to make sure that schools do have all the gear that they need. And I know, I've spoken with people that work for the organization, Miss Dye's Closet. They do make donations to the elementary schools. I know there are efforts at the schools to collect donations and make sure the kids have what they need, but just sort of like a doubling down effort. Obviously, the board members won't be there day to day to do this, but I think I feel comfortable with knowing how things do work at the schools, that there is attention to this, and that especially if there's a change made, that there'll be even more attention to it.
If I can just add to that, we will as soon as this is done, we will align an updated procedures document to this, and we can emphasize in there. And as we train people and roll out whatever the new version is, we can place an emphasis in the procedures on making sure that everybody has the appropriate gear and that they have a way to assess whether students have what they need before they go outside. But I agree, it seems like generally they're doing a pretty good job with this so far.
Yes, Vice Chair Bondo.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm comfortable going in favor with this amendment because I'm looking, especially for the maximum temperature, and the 95 is making more sense. And I feel like you just say, really recognizing that we have some schools who are not really well equipped with some shaded zone for our vulnerable students. So I think going to 95 Fahrenheit is just giving me a little more comfort on going in favor with the amendment. And just to make sure for the decision, then the staff has to, I know then we have the longest winter and really a small summer. So everything is also the summer school, summer classes, all those activities are all included, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
I think I have a
Yeah, go ahead.
just a quick comment. I think I also agree with Nikki. The most important thing for me was the heat. The cold, kids can recognize it's really cold and they'd be like, I'm cold. But when it comes to heat, that's a little bit more something you got to be aware of. And it being to 95, I think that it obviously is better than 99 from my perspective. And I'm not what made me actually let's rethink this is I'm not too concerned because and I'm not as concerned as I would be because obviously the times when we have 90-degree weather, like high 80s, 90s up to 100 plus, is usually in midsummer. So school's not even open during then. Yeah, that's just other than summer schools, things like that. So I'm just in agreement.
So we do have students on campus in the summers and we do have students in vehicles in the summers. But the number of students is significantly less than the school year. So I just
Right,
wanted
right,
to.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, Chair, if I could just say something about that. I mean, we have struggled some with this in the last couple of summers with climate change. It's definitely getting harder. Um, and it hasn't affected us all that much during the regular school year, but it definitely becomes an issue for us during summer programming. Um, and so we're doing our best to manage it, but I would just kind of lift this up for the board as an issue that we're going to need to think about moving forward when we look at what we're doing with facilities as longer term facilities planning and when we're thinking about purchasing vehicles. The only vehicles we have right now that are air conditioned are vans, and they're small. They don't transport many students. Our buses are not air conditioned and they can get very hot. Um, and our buildings it's a mix. There's some air conditioning in some spaces, but as a general rule, our school buildings are not air conditioned across the board. And so It's obviously a lot more expensive to purchase buses with air conditioning or to retrofit them, more expensive to outfit buildings with air conditioning. But it's just something that I think the board will have to contend with and think about moving forward as we're doing our facilities and, capital procurement planning, and make some difficult decisions about whether those investments are warranted or not.
Okay, thank you everyone for your thoughts. Sorry, I was on mute. Okay, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you are in favor of accepting policy EBBD to pass on to the full board as amended. Ali,
Yes.
Yusra Ali,
Yes.
Vice Chair Bondo,
Yes.
and I'm yes. So that passes unanimously. Thank you, Dr. Warren, for that presentation.
Great. Okay. So those were the two votes for the evening. The next is really just a sort of priming a conversation around the 2027-28 calendar. Dr. Scallon has encouraged us to go ahead and work on that year's calendar. And it will definitely put us out ahead of our colleagues. I've been looking for other districts, even the big districts like Boston and New York, to see if they go that far ahead. And they haven't posted 27-28 calendars yet. But the advantage of us trying to adopt this before the end of this school year is that we just give our families and our staff a lot more advance notice so that they can plan. And, I think in general have been getting positive feedback on the calendar and on some of the changes that the board has made, like adding in the holidays for Yom Kippur and Eid. But it is easier for people to plan if they know in advance. And one of the oddities of the coming school year, and it's still true the year after, is that Labor Day falls fairly late, and that just seems to create some confusion for people. So the more we can put this out in advance, I think the better off we'll be. So that's the goal here. And just as a reminder, this is something that we have to do and the board has to do by state law by April each year. So you would be well in advance. The total number of days required is 180, but that includes 175 instructional days. And then those additional days can be achieved in other days, like with teacher PD and service, learning, administrative meetings, etc.
Dr. Warren, I see that Vice Chair Bondo has a hand up.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Warren, I just need to have a clarification. You just mentioned about posting that one in advance. What we're talking about is the 27-28, right?
Correct.
So we already have the 26-27 that we already passed.
Exactly.
So when are we going to start posting 2 years in the row, or are we, so as the process will happen, because we're voting every year for the following year, school year, and then having that options for 2 years, which is not bad at all, but just want to understand, are we going to start voting in April? We're voting for the current year to come, for the year to come, and also the option for the second year at the same time?
Mm-hmm. So yes, I think that is the goal, is to get 2 years in advance. My suggestion would be that if we can reach agreement about what the 27-28 calendar looks like within the next, before the end of this school year, and the board approves that, it probably would make sense to revisit next April just to make sure that there are no changes necessary, because something could evolve, or we could learn something in the interim that might shift that. But yeah, the idea would be to always be 2 years ahead in terms of calendar development. Did that answer that question, Vice Chair Bondo? Okay. And again, we just went through this with the 26-27 calendar, so I'm not going to belabor it, but just a reminder that part of what we're doing here as well is making sure that before we get too far down the path, that we're doing our best to align with our paths, our CTE program partners, other sending districts. And then within the contract for the PEA, that stipulates how many days they have in addition to the student days. So they work effectively have 4 days at the start of the school year, a day that we can use for teacher PD in the middle of the year, and then they contractually get a day at the end of the school year to be able to wrap up what they were doing. And so you'll see those days in the draft calendar as well. And then the ed techs don't have quite the same contract, but it's closer. So the 4 days at the start of the coming school year is what they have asked for, and then they would get the day in March. And so the 27-28 calendar, you'll see in a second, is structured the same way as what they had requested for 26-27. There's still engagement to be done around this. I'm only showing you kind of how it's taking shape and would love a little bit of input from the committee as we continue to go forward in engaging our partners around this. And there are many different considerations that go into the calendar. So we have to get the required number of days, but we're also trying to sort of fit the year in between the end of summer, not getting too late into September, but and sometimes it's easy to get in after Labor Day, but sometimes Labor Day falls really late, which makes it harder. We have certainly heard from our community and our staff that people would like to have students done by Juneteenth if at all possible, so June 19th. We have to account for the snow days, and our practice over the last few years has been to have 3 snow days, and those have to be made up at the end of the school year. Once we have used those 3, then we've been moving to remote learning. And on a remote learning day, learning that counts as a school day. We just have to make sure that we provide food for students. That's one of the requirements of the state when we go to remote. We've again heard positive feedback on the addition of Yom Kippur and Eid. And so in addition to the required holidays by the state, we have preserved those. And we have our traditional breaks in the winter, December and early January, a February break and an April break. And we have been trying really hard to keep this, create a new tradition of having a full professional development day for all staff across the district in March. So I'm about to flip over to the actual draft calendar and would love, as you're looking at that, just to get any thoughts you have in general, any feedback, any questions. And in particular, if you look at the start and end of the school year, and have any thoughts about, whether we're starting too early, ending too early. The interesting sort of twist here is that it just happens that Indigenous Peoples Day and Yom Kippur are due to fall on the same day in the fall of 2027. And so normally those would take up 2 holidays, but actually they're on one day. And so it's only one holiday. And so we may have some flexibility there. For example, we could say, well, we'll recognize one on the Friday before and one on the Monday and sort of turn it into a 4-day weekend. Or we could, I don't know, potentially take that day and use it at another point in the year. So we'd need to think that through a little bit, but it does give us slightly more flexibility and maybe some choices. And then any other thoughts and questions that you have as you're looking at this that you would like us to take into account as we're moving to the next draft of the calendar. So I'm going to flip to the actual draft calendar. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay.
Dr. Warren, I'm wondering if we're doing this in advance, how are we able to align our calendars with the other districts if they're not doing this?
Because we're still going to show it to them. We're just trying to get them to align faster. And so Kevin, our director at PATHS, has actually strongly encouraged this, and I think a lot of the districts would like us to do it sooner because I think they feel like they're waiting for us since we're the receiving district. It's easier for them to know sooner what our plans are. Makes it a little easier for them to plan. So we'll see. I can't say that this has never been done this way, but it certainly hasn't been done this way since I've been here. So we'll see how this works out. But at the end of the day, we're hoping that actually this just makes it a little bit easier for folks to have some prior sense of where we're heading.
I guess my thought is about that additional day, is I'm wondering if that might be something that we would need to kind of use as an aligning tool. It might be helpful to
Yeah, that's a good point.
Any other questions from committee members or Chair Lens?
I just wanted to comment that I also think that this, like booking or scheduling the calendar out even further helps us with our internal schedules and being able to book, board meetings, district meetings, all of those things internally within the district. So I just support, creating calendars as far in advance that we can, because I think it really does help us plan out backwards from that.
So let me just quickly run you through here. It's fairly straightforward, I think. But the idea would be for the students, grades, this has been our practice, so grades 1 to 12 would start on the Monday. And again, in this case, the Monday before Labor Day, because Labor Day doesn't fall until the 6th of September. And they would have 4 days of school and then that Friday before Labor Day off. When we tried to get input on that this year, we were given some pretty strong feedback, especially from our collective bargaining partners, that they wanted that day off before the Labor Day weekend. So that feels like that's kind of untouchable to me. And so then that also means that those days, the week before students arrive, those become the first teacher days when they are both doing professional development and getting set up for the school year. And when we talked with the union about that this year, we talked about whether to start on a Monday and give them the Friday off before students come back, and they preferred to come back on a Tuesday and have 4 days and then go into the weekend. So then you get obviously 4 days of school except for the pre-K and K students who would come on the second day, and that just gives everybody a little bit more time to prepare for them and brings them in at a time that's a little bit less busy and more focused to try to support their integration into schools. And then the other things I would note, again, here on the 11th of October, this is 2027, it just happens that Indigenous Peoples Day and Yom Kippur fall at the same time, or projected to be on the same day. And so that's something for us to think about there. And then one thing that was potentially a win here, we'd gotten great feedback from last school year when we were able to do the two full weeks off of winter break. We couldn't do that for this year. We couldn't do that for the coming calendar year because the holidays just didn't fall quite the same way and the schedule was different. But based on what I've done so far, unless I made a mistake, I think that we should be able to get a solid 2-week break in again. Taking the Monday of that, basically the last 2 weeks of December off. And then it just happens that that sort of runs into the new year, falls on a weekend. So that could be a win, thanks to just the way the days fall. And then we would have our traditional February break. And it just so happens that the anticipated day of Eid al-Fitr falls over that weekend at the end of that break. And so we could observe that on the Monday, and that would give people a slightly extended February break. And then the spring break is pretty traditional at this stage. It starts on Patriots' Day and rolls forward. And so with the current structure proposed here, students would be, if we had no storm days, which is not common, but it's possible, then they could be done by June 9th, which seems early. But if there were storm days, then they would return that next week and finish on the 12th, 13th, or 14th. But what that means is there's a little bit of wiggle room in there at the end of the year, in this current version of the calendar, if we wanted to do something else with that in the middle of the year.
Carolyn's question.
Yeah, just wanted to ask if we could just touch base with rec to see kind of like if they have any idea what their camp schedule will look like this summer, and maybe some of the bigger players for summer programming. Just that seems like a really early release, which is exciting, but could leave families with, multiple weeks at the beginning of the summer and at the end of the summer without potential childcare options. So I think maybe just, and it may be what we have to do, but just having information from other places would be helpful before making a final decision on this.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you for flagging that. I think they often schedule, around us and when we're finishing school. So it's a little bit of a game of chicken. But you're right that would be particularly early for them.
One question I have, Dr. Warren, is with this predicted last student day of the 9th, if we add in one more day, holiday, then it would be the 10th. Is that correct? Or,
Then it would be the 12th
sorry,
because
the Monday.
Yeah.
Okay. Just one thought I had was that historically, in my time teaching, and I think as a parent, we've often had the Friday before Indigenous Peoples Day as a professional day, I think, like a teacher work day. And so for families that don't have any teachers, it feels like a 4-day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So that could just be like a natural fit, but I'm open to any suggestions.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any thoughts or questions for Dr. Warren? Any last thoughts from you, Dr. Warren? Anything else you want us to think about in the interim? Or maybe just what our next step will be? I mean, next step would probably be to approve it, right?
Yeah, I will. I'm going to do some more engagement with our union partners, with Cabinet. Just wanted to get some, initial thinking from you all, and if there were any particular guardrails you wanted to put around it. And then I'll continue to engage, and we'll talk to our PATS partners more as well. And then we'll bring it back for the committee to review the next draft, and hopefully at that point we'll be ready to vote on it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that is the end of our agenda. I would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second? You guys want to stick around? Yes, thank you.
I got you.
Thank you, Ali. All in favor, please show your hands. Yusra Ali, are you in favor of adjourning?
Sorry, I'm trying to. Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. All right, then we are adjourned at 6:57 p.m. and we have other committee meetings at 7:30. Thank you so much, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.